Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Wilcox. I'm an author, content creator, and someone who's trying to make the most of job hunting by starting a booktube channel to keep my sanity, as I have mentioned. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you everything I read in September, as well as towards the end, a very fast-paced run-through of all the books I want to read in the fall, because unfortunately, there are too many books and not enough fall, as I mentioned in the previous video. The amount that I would like to consume this fall, the amount of pressure I'm putting on myself for no reason is a little crazy, but I figure if I just do like a quick list of the books that are on my radar, you'll know the books that I'm picking from. To get started with everything I read in September, I've been seeing a lot of booktube folk do their reading stats from Fable, which I am going to do now. In September, my reader summary was called Genre Blender. Honestly, that description made me feel proud of myself because this year I've really been working on branching out. I really am a person who enjoys reading everything. I feel as though every genre has something to offer and there's something to learn. The stats of my most read genres, my most read genre so far this year, built up with September, was literary fiction. I don't know why I'm shocked by that. I've been reading a lot of fantasy as well. My top genres are literary fiction, fantasy, young adult, romance, and sci-fi. Just learned throughout this year that I don't think I'm a full romance reader, and that is okay. I'm trying to accept that about myself. I much more prefer a subplot of romance or more of an Emily Henry type vibe. I love Emily Henry, duh, who doesn't? Going into all the books I read in September, the first book I actually started in late August and I finished in September was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I actually have my reaction to this book in the first vlog I posted for this channel. Again, as I said in that reading vlog, this book feels like it's left a sticky pigment over my skin. Even though I didn't really like it, it will not leave me. I keep thinking about it. Do with that what you will. I'm not going to go too into detail on the books I read during that reading vlog just because I go into a lot of detail of my thoughts in that video. So I highly recommend watching that if you want to cleanse my palate. After reading My Year of Rest and Relaxation, I read The Moth Keeper, which is a graphic novel about a young child who lives in a village that operates in darkness and sleeps during the daylight. They get promoted to the job of moth keeper in their village, which is a very coveted and sacred position to hold within this village. And you're just kind of following this child's experience in stepping into that role. You learn a lot of the lore and the backstory to the people in the town, why the village operates in darkness. It was super quick and super wholesome. I highly recommend. The next book I read, I actually have with me Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I have had this book on my TBR, I'm pretty sure since it came out in what? It was like 2019. Am I making that up? 2021. Oh my gosh, it came out in 2021. When I jumped into this book, I had just realized a couple weeks prior that this was actually science fiction. I have been reading more science fiction. I never thought, or I say reading, I've been listening to a lot of science fiction with the Murderbot Diaries, which we'll get into in a second. I typically am someone who gets very stressed out by space. I avoid talking about space. I don't need to be in space. I don't need to hear about you in space. But this is definitely more of a sci-fi dystopian contemporary vibe, and I really enjoyed it. I was so surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I think it's going to be one of my favorites and one that I recommend to people. I'm so excited, hopefully, to jump into his other well-known novel, Never Let Me Go. This was just remarkably good social commentary as well. I went in tandem with the audiobook and the physical copy I had from the library, but I went to the thrift store and I found this cover, which you cannot find right now, in paperback for $3, 50% off. So I got this paperback for $1.50, $1.50. Are you joking? I'm very proud of that. Clara and the Sun. The next book I read was also a part of that reading vlog, which was Fourth Wing. I go into a lot more detail of what I thought about Fourth Wing in that video, but overall, overall, I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed Fourth Wing. Obviously, with any very popular hyped book, I tend to be kind of weary of just because I really will read everything, but sometimes I have to keep myself in check with not being a bit of a snob, okay? I'm admitting it. I'm admitting it. Even the books I've written are not perfect books, and I know that. And guess what? It keeps me awake at night, okay? With Fourth Wing, I was so surprised at how hooked I was, how much I enjoyed the characters, how much I enjoyed the world. I think that's what stood out to me the most about this book. Really loved the world building this author did and how palatable she made the world. I think that's why this was such a successful fantasy book, is she was so clever in how accessible she made a pretty complex fantasy universe. And it was something that I was really glad that I read because I actually learned a lot stylistically from it and have like a couple notes in my head just as a writer myself. Even though I don't write fantasy, I admired how she went about the world building in this book. So the next two books I read are actually a part of a graphic novel duology that I mentioned in my fall recommendations video, which is Garlic and the Vampire and Garlic and the Witch. I read these for the first time in September and I have not stopped thinking about them. They are so short, so beautiful, so wholesome. They made me so unbelievably happy. I could actually read The Garlic and the Vampire before bed every night and be completely satisfied as a human being. It is so sweet. It really feels like the story is embracing you. I will never stop recommending it. I don't care if it's spooky season. I don't care if you're in the heat of summer. You gotta read Garlic and the Vampire and Garlic and the Witch. The next book I read is the last book that is referenced in my reading vlog that I posted, which is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This was my first Sally Rooney book. I have a lot more thoughts about the book in that reading vlog, but I will say now, really enjoyed this book. And I have a feeling that once I dive more into all of Sally Rooney's work, I'm going to be hooked. I just think Sally Rooney has such an interesting way of portraying humanity in a way that is so irritating and forgiving. I'm terrified to watch the show. I don't think I have the actual mental, emotional capacity to watch the show and be mentally stable. I'm gonna put a pause on watching the show for now. The book, at the ending, pain. The next two books I read were a part of the Murderbot Diaries, and I listened to the graphic audio productions of Artificial Condition and Rogue Protocol. Y'all, I am eating up the Murderbot Diaries. I am so shocked. I never thought that I would enjoy reading about a robot. Clara and the Sun, the Murderbot Diaries. I'm learning that when these robots are like very quirky, human-like, and not very good at being robots, feed me. Feed me. I don't know why. My favorite of the two was definitely Artificial Condition. And if you're not a sci-fi reader, like I can't classify myself as a sci-fi reader for reading like 4 sci-fi books. If you're new to the sci-fi genre, these graphic audio productions of the Murderbot Diaries, one, it really does feel like a movie in your mind, which is what they say at the beginning of the audiobook. They are so funny and quick. I know that there are some longer books in this series, which I'm honestly really excited about, but these are like maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and I just put them on while I'm doing chores, and it actually is the best thing ever. Whoever decided to do this with these books, thank you. Thank you so much, because now I've learned that I think I'm kind of into sci-fi, which is really cool, and I'm excited to listen to more of this series. The next book I read was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, which is a historical, gothic, magical realism book about a woman and her bridegroom. They get married. They have this whirlwind, sensual obsession of a romance with each other, but there's also this very eerie, dark undertone in the midst of it. The only rule that she tells the bridegroom is that you cannot look into my past. You cannot know anything about me as a person, basically. And that works out until she gets a phone call where she has to go back to her childhood home. This is also one of those books where the house is a living, breathing entity. If you enjoy gothic, literary, historical, magical, whimsical vibes. I really think you'll like this book. It definitely was creepy, and I'm pretty sensitive to creepy, but I was fine. I really enjoyed this book. The writing of this book, if you love lyrical writing, if you are a girly who wants to be highlighting, this book is for sure for you. It's also perfect for the fall and perfect for spooky season, even though it does have gothic horror elements if you want something creepy, but you don't want to be too freaked out. I also did part physical book, part audiobook because my time with the physical book ran out and I had to give it back to the library. And the last book I read in September was my first Kristen Hanna book ever, which is her most recent work, The Women. I do enjoy historical fiction. I will say, as a child, historical fiction, history, biography, I really was into the American Red Cross for some reason in third grade, and that spiraled into me reading a lot of obviously children's books that were set in different points of history. And so I do have a very soft spot in my heart for this genre, and I have a couple of favorite books that are in this genre. But this was my first Kristen Hanna book, which I know so many people recommend reading The Nightingale first or The Great Alone, but this is all I could get at the library. It was a part of their Lucky Day thing, which is just like, it was a lucky day when I saw this. I actually can't get my hands on any Kristen Hanna books at the library because I'm like 30th in line for the hold. The newest work is a fictionalized retelling of the forgotten stories of the women who fought in the Vietnam War. Primarily focuses on combat nurses and a story of one combat nurse in particular. This was a heart-wrenching book, as I have heard most of her books are. I now have a hyperfixation about the Vietnam War because truly, I really didn't know that much. That is one thing I really love about the historical fiction genre, is how much you can learn about different time periods. I would 100% check the trigger warnings on this book, as with probably all of her books. There were some parts of it that were very gory because she is a combat nurse and she's witnessing a lot of horrific injuries. I typically forget to read content warnings before going into books. And I also think that if you are someone who is particularly sensitive to veteran stories, PTSD, to grief and loss, to some of that like medical gore, I would really tread lightly with this book. This is definitely a story that is going to stick with me throughout the rest of this year. Reading the author's note at the back, I sincerely commend her for how much research went into this book. I cannot imagine. And there was one little acknowledgement that she did at the end of it that actually made me cry even more. By the way, this was a very emotional way to end September. Okay, I just went and grabbed all of the books that are on my radar to read in the fall. I'm trying to think if I should just go through my whole fall TBR for like October and November, which I'm thinking I might do. I'm just going to go through as many as I can, and I'm such a mood reader. I literally added more books to the TBR this morning. The library website is so dangerous for me because it feels like online shopping. Oh, hello.
Oh, what do you gotta say? What's on your fall TBR? What do you want to read, Ruth?
I'm going to attempt to do a rapid fire. This is what is currently on my radar to read during the fall. And I'm going to go through categories and I'm going to go through them so quickly. The first category I have is graphic novels. On that list, we have, okay, wow. Ghost Roast, Pumpkinheads, Lightfall, The Firefly Apprentice, and Wildwood. Next, I'm going to do the romance category, which unfortunately is super small, but I have The X-Hex and Talking at Night. The next group I have are thrillers and mysteries, The Caramel Pecan Roll Murder, The Woman in the Library, Bright Young Women, A Dreadful Splendor, and Mexican Gothic. The next category of books are in combination with Gothic slash classic slash Hispanic Heritage Month. The first book we have in this category, which technically this is not for Hispanic Heritage Month, this is more within like the Gothic Gothic classic category. We Have Always Lived in a Castle, and then leaning more towards the classics Hispanic Heritage Month category, we have The Hour of the Star and Like Water for Chocolate. The next category is science fiction, which I probably will end up listening to some Murderbot Diary book within the next 2 months, but it's not specifically on my TBR. But the two sci-fi books that are on my TBR, Moonbound and Red Rising. And the last couple books that are on my fall TBR, fantasy, dark academia category, If We Were Villains, The Secret History, and I'm also on hold for Graveyard Shift. Mistborn, which this will be my first Brandon Sanderson experience, and if I don't get to it in the fall, I want to at least read the first Mistborn by the end of the year. One Dark Window, which I have a feeling will end up being my Fable Book Club's pick for October. Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is a book that if I do not read in the fall, I need to finish it this year, okay? Someone slap me if I do not finish this book this year. Lastly, The Starless Sea. Okay, that was my September reading wrap up, as well as going through my fall TBR very, very quickly. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to know what you read during September. If you want to see more book videos and an upcoming very autumnal reading vlog from me, please subscribe. I am wishing you the coziest of fall reading this week. Bye!